Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so we're on YouTube and we're continuing with Ithaca, reading and then discussion. We're going to start by everyone who's present, that's all seven of us, get a chance to read aloud, however much you desire to read, and then we're going to discuss what we have read. So I will lead off. What impeded Bloom from giving Stephen counsels of hygiene and prophylactic, to which should be added suggestions concerning a preliminary wetting of the head and contraction of the muscles with rapid splashing of the face and neck and thorax and epigastric region in case of sea or river bathing? Parts of the human anatomy most sensitive to cold being the nape, stomach, and thenar, or sole of foot. The incompatibility of aquosity with the erratic originality of genius. What additional didactic counsels did he similarly express or repress? What additional didactic counsels did he, Bloom, similarly repress? Dietary, concerning the respective percentage of protein and caloric energy in bacon, salt ling, and butter. The absence of the former in the last name, and the abundance of the latter in the first name. What seemed to the host to be the predominant qualities of his guest? Confidence in himself, an equal and opposite power of abandonment and recuperation. Next reader, please.
What concomitant phenomenon took place in the vessel of liquid by the agency of fire? The phenomenon of ebullition. Fanned by a constant updraft of the ventilation between the kitchen and the chimney flue, ignition was communicated from the faggots of precombustible fuel to polyhedral masses of bituminous coal, containing in compressed mineral form the foliated fossilized decidua of primal forests, which had in turn derived their vegetative existence from the sun, primal source of heat, radiant, transmitted through omnipresent luminiferous diatherminous ether. Heat, convected, a mode of motion developed by such combustion, was constantly and increasingly conveyed from the source of calorification to the liquid contained in the vessel, being radiated through the uneven, unpolished dark surface of the metal iron, in part reflected, in part absorbed, in part transmitted, gradually raising the temperature of the water from normal to a boiling point. A rise in temperature expressible as the result of an expenditure of 72 thermal units needed to raise 1 pound of water from 50 degrees to 212 degrees Fahrenheit. What announced the accomplishment of this rise in temperature? A double falciform ejection of water vapor from under the kettle lid at both sides simultaneously. To what personal purpose could Bloom have applied the water so boiled? To shave himself. Joe?
What advantages attended shaving by night? A softer beard. A softer brush if intentionally allowed to remain from shave to shave in its agglutinated lather. A softer skin if unexpectedly encountering female acquaintances in remote places at uncustomary hours. Quiet reflections upon the course of the day. A cleaner sensation when awakening after a fresher sleep, since matutinal noises, premonitions and perturbations, a clattered milk can, a postman's double knock, a paper reread while lathering, relathering the same spot, a shock, a shoot, with thoughts of aught he sought, though fraught with naught, might cause a faster rate of shave and a nick, on which incision plaster with precision cut and humected and adhered, which was to be done. Why did the absence of light disturb him less than the presence of noise? Because of the surety of the sense of touch of his firm, full, masculine, feminine, passive, active hand. What quality did it, his hand, possess? But with what counteracting influence? The operative surgical quality, but that he was reluctant to shed human blood, even when the end justified the means, preferring, in their natural order, heliotherapy, psychotherapeutics, osteopathic surgery. Lois, do you want to go?
What lay exposed on the lower, middle, and upper shelves of the kitchen dresser, opened by Bloom? On the lower shelf, 5 vertical breakfast plates, 6 horizontal breakfast saucers, on which rested inverted breakfast cups, a mustache cup, uninverted, a saucer of Crown Derby, 4 white gold-rimmed egg cups, an open chamois purse displaying coins, mostly copper, and a file of aromatic violet comfits. On the middle shelf, a chipped egg cup containing pepper, a drum of table salt, 4 conglomerated black olives in oleaginous paper, an empty pot of Plumtree's potted meat, an oval wicker basket embedded with fiber and containing 1 Jersey pear, a half-empty bottle of William Gilby & Co.'s white invalid port, half disrobed of its swathe of coral pink tissue paper, a packet of Epps soluble cocoa, 5 ounces of Anne Lynch's Choice tea at 2 per pound, in a crinkled lead paper bag, a cylindrical canister containing the best crystallized lump sugar, 2 onions, 1 the larger Spanish, entire, the other smaller Irish, bisected with augmented surface and more redolent, a jar of Irish model Dairy's cream, a jug of brown crockery containing a naggin and a quarter of sour adulterated milk, converted by heat into water, acidulous syrup, and semi-solidified curds, which added to the quantity subtracted from Mr. Bloom's and Mrs. Fleming's breakfasts, made 1 imperial pint, the total quantity originally delivered, 2 cloves, a halfpenny, and a small dish containing a slice of fresh rib steak. On the upper shelf, a battery of jam jars empty, of various sizes and conveniences. What attracted his attention lying on the apron of the dresser? 4 polygonal fragments of 2 lacerated scarlet betting tickets, number 8, 87, 88, 6. What reminiscences temporarily corrugated his brow? Reminiscences of coincidences, truth stranger than fiction, pre-indicative of the result of the Gold Cup flat handicap, the official and definitive result of which he had read in the Evening Telegraph, late pink edition, in Cabman Shelter at Buttbridge. Next, please.
Okay. Where had previous intimation of the result affected or projected been received by him? In Bernard Kiernan's licensed premises 8, 9, and 10, Little Britain Street. In Davy Byrne's licensed premises 14 Duke Street. In O'Connell Street Lower outside Graham Lemon's, when a dark man had placed in his hand a throwaway, subsequently thrown away, advertising Elijah Restorer of the Church in Zion. In Lincoln Place outside the premises of F.W. Sweeney and Company Limited, dispensing chemists, when Frederick M. Bantam Lines, missed that before, had rapidly and successively requested and resuscitated the copy of the current issue of the Freeman's Journal and National Press, which he had been about to throw away, subsequently thrown away. He had proceeded towards the oriental edifice of the Turkish and warm baths, 11 Leicester Street, with the light of inspiration shining in his countenance, and bearing in his arms the scent of the race, graven in the language of prediction. What qualifying considerations allayed his perturbations, the difficulties of interpretation, since the significance of any event followed its occurrence as variably as the acoustic report followed the electric discharge, and of accounting estimating against an actual loss by failure to interpret the total sum of possible losses proceeding originally from a successful interpretation. His mood? He had not risked, he did not expect, he had not been disappointed, he was satisfied. What satisfied him? To have sustained no positive loss, to have brought a positive gain to others, light to Gentiles. Katrina.
How, excuse me, how did Bloom prepare a collation for a Gentile? He poured 2 teacups, 2 level spoonfuls, 4 in all, of Epis-soluble cocoa, and proceeded according to the direction for use printed on the label, to each adding, after sufficient time for infusion, the prescribed ingredients for diffusion in the manner and the quantity prescribed. What supererogatory marks of special hospitality did the host show his guest, relinquishing his symposiarchal right to the mustache cup of imitation Crown Derby presented to him by his only daughter, Millicent Millie? He substituted a cup identical with that of his guest and served extraordinarily to his guest, and, in reduced measure, to himself, with viscous cream ordinarily reserved for the breakfast of his wife, Marian, Molly. What was the guest conscious of, and did he acknowledge these marks of hospitality? His attention was directed to them by his host jocosely, and he accepted them seriously as they drank in jocose seriousness Silence Epps' mass product, the creature cocoa. Were there marks of hospitality which he contemplated but suppressed, reserving them for another and for himself on future occasions to complete the act begun? The reparation of a fissure of the length of 1½ inches in the right side of his guest's jacket, a gift to his guest of one of the 4 ladies' handkerchiefs, if and when ascertained to be presentable condition. Who drank more quickly? Bloom, having the advantage of 10 seconds at the initiation and taking from the concave surface of a spoon, along the handle of which steady flow of heat was conducted, 3 ships to his opponent's 1-6-9-3. What celebration accompanied his frequentative act? Concluding by inspection, but erroneously, that his silent companion was engaged in mental composition, he reflected on the pleasures derived from literature, of instruction rather than of amusement, as he himself had applied to the works of William Shakespeare more than once for the solution of difficult problems in imaginary or real life. Orla.
Had he found their solution? In spite of careful and repeated reading of certain classical passages, aided by a glossary, he had derived imperfect conviction from the text, the answers not bearing in all points. What lines concluded his first piece of original verse, written by him, potential poet, at the age of 11 in 1877, on the occasion of the offering of 3 prizes of 10 pence, 5 pence, and 2 and 6, or is that shillings, respectively, by the Shamrock, a weekly newspaper. An ambition to squint at my verses in print makes me hope that for these you'll find room if you so condescend. Then please place at the end the name of yours truly, L. Bloom.
Huh.
Did he find 4 separating forces between his temporary guest and him? Name, age, race, creed. What anagrams had he made on his name in youth?
Huh.
Leopold Bloom, Elpod Bomul, Mul Dup le bloom. Follow a dim. Old Hollybow, MP. Next, please. Duncan.
Oh, my goodness. Shall we go for another round before we start our discussion?
Yes.
Lois leaps to the fore. All right. What acrostic upon the abbreviation of his first name had he, kinetic poet, sent to Miss Marion Tweedy on the 14th February, 1888? Poets oft have sung in rhyme, of music sweet their praise divine. Let them hymn it 9 times 9, dearer far than song or wine. You are mine, the world is mine. What prevented him from completing a topical song, music by R.G. Johnson, on the events of the past or fixtures for the actual years, entitled, If Brian Boru Could But Come Back and See Old Dublin Now? Commissioned by Michael Gunn, Lessee of the Gaiety Theatre, 46, 47, 48, 49, South King Street, and to be introduced into the sixth scene, The Valley of Diamonds, of the second edition, 30 January 1893, of the grand annual Christmas pantomime, Sinbad the Sailor, written by Greenleaf Whittier. Scenery by George A. Jackson and Cecil Hicks. Costumes by Mrs. and Miss Whelan. Produced by R. Shelton, 26 December 1892. With the personal supervision of Mrs. Michael Gunn. Ballets by Jesse Noir. Harlequinade by Thomas Otto. Sung by Nellie Boverist. Principal Girl? Next.
First, oscillation between events of imperial and local interest. The anticipated Diamond Jubilee of Queen Victoria, born 1820, acceded 1837, and participated in the opening of the new municipal fish market. Secondly, apprehension of opposition from extreme circles on the question of the respective visits of their Royal Highnesses the Duke and Duchess of York, real, and of His Majesty King Brian Boru, imaginary. Thirdly, a conflict between professional etiquette and the professional emulation concerning the recent erections of the Grand Lyric Hall on Burgh Quay and the Theatre Royal in Hawkins Street. Fourthly, distraction resulting from compassion for Nellie Bouverist's non-intellectual, non-political, non-topical expression of countenance and concupiscence caused by Nellie Bouverist's revelations of white articles of non-intellectual, non-political, non-topical underclothing while she, Nellie Bouverist, was in the articles. Fifthly, the difficulties of the selection of appropriate music and humorous allusion from Everybody's Book of Jokes, 1,000 pages and a laugh in every one. Sixthly, the rhymes, homophonous and cacophonous, associated with the names of the new Lord Mayor Daniel Tellon and the new High Sheriff Thomas Pyle and the new Solicitor General Dunbar Plunkett Barton. Joe?
What relation existed between their ages? 16 years before, in 1888, when Bloom was of Stephen's present age, Stephen was 6. 16 years after, in 1920, when Stephen would be Bloom's present age, Bloom would be 54. In 1936, when Bloom would be 70 and Stephen 54, their ages, initially in the ratio of 16:0, would be as 7.5 to 13.5, the proportion increasing and the disparity diminishing according as arbitrary future years were added. For if the proportion existing in 1883 had continued immutable, conceiving that to be possible, till Then, 1904, when Stephen was 22, Bloom would be 374. And in 1920, when Stephen would be 38, as was then, Bloom would be 646. While in 1952, when Stephen would have attained the maximum post-Diluvian age of 70, Bloom, being 1,190 years alive, having been born in the year 714, would have surpassed by 221 years the maximum antediluvian age, that of Methuselah, 969 years. While if Stephen would continue to live until he had attained that age in the year 3072 AD, Bloom would have been obliged to have been alive 83,300 years, having been obliged to have been born in the year 81,396 BC. What events might nullify these calculations? The creation or existence of both or either the inauguration of a new era or calendar, the annihilation of the world, and consequent extermination of the human species, inevitable but unpredictable. Joyce.
How many previous encounters proved their pre-existing acquaintance? 2. The first, in the lilac garden of Matthew Dillon's house, Medina Villa, Kimmage Road, Roundtown, in 1887, in the company of Stephen's mother. Stephen being then of the age of 5 and reluctant to give his hand in salutation. The second, in the coffee room of Breslин's Hotel on a rainy Sunday in the January of 1892, in the company of Stephen's father and Stephen's granduncle, Stephen being then 5 years older. Did Bloom accept the invitation to dinner given then by the son and afterwards seconded by the father? Very gratefully, with grateful appreciation, with sincere appreciative gratitude, with appreciatively grateful sincerity of regret, he declined. Did their conversation on the subject of these reminiscences reveal a third connecting link between them? Mrs. Royden Dante, a widow of independent means, had resided at the house of Stephen's parents from 1 September 1888 to 29 December 1889, and had also resided during the years 1892, 1893, and 1894 in the City Arms Hotel owned by Elizabeth O'Dowd of 54 Precious Street, where during parts of the years of 1893 and 1894, she had been a constant informant of Bloom, who resided also in the same hotel, being at the same time a clerk in the employment of Joseph Cuff of 5 Smithfield for the superintendence of sales in the adjacent Dublin Cattle Market on the North Circular Road. Next.
Had he performed any special corporal work of mercy for her? He had sometimes propelled her on warm summer evenings, an infirm widow of independent, if limited, means in her convalescent bath chair, with slow revolutions of its wheels, as far as the corner of North Circular Road, opposite Mr. Gavin Lowe's place of business, where she had remained for a certain time scanning through his one-lens binocular field glasses, unrecognizable citizens on tramcars, roadster bicycles equipped with inflated pneumatic tires, hackney carriages, tandems, private and hired, landers, dog carts, pony traps and brakes, passing from the city to the Phoenix Park and vice versa. Why could he then support that his vigil with the greater equanimity? Because in middle youth, he'd often sat observing through a rondel of vast glass of a multicolored pane, the spectacle offered with continual change of the thoroughfare without, pedestrians, quadrupeds, velocipedes, vehicles passing slowly, quickly, evenly, round and round and round, the rim of a round and round precipitous globe. What distinct different memories had each of her now 8 years deceased? The older, her besieged cars encounters, her Skye Terrier, high supposition wealth, her lapses of responsiveness and insipid casual depthness. The younger, her lamp of colza oil before the statue of the Immaculate Conception. Her green and maroon brushes for Charles Stuart Parnell and for Michael Davitt for tissue papers. Katrina.
Were there no means still remaining to him to achieve the rejuvenation which these reminiscences divulged to a younger companion rendered the more desirable? The indoor exercises, formerly intermittently practiced, subsequently abandoned, prescribed in Eugen Sandel's Physical Strength and How to Attain It, which, designed particularly for commercial men engaged in sedentary occupations, were to be made with mental concentration in front of a mirror so as to bring into play the various families of muscles and produce successfully a pleasant rigidity, a more pleasant relaxation, and most pleasant repristination of juvenile agility. Had any special agility been his in early youth? Though ring weight lifting had been beyond his strength, and the full circle gyration beyond his courage, yet as a high school scholar he had excelled in his stable and protracted execution of the half lever movement on the parallel bars in consequence of his abnormally developed abdominal muscles. Did either openly allude to their racial difference? Neither. What reduced their simplest reciprocal form were Bloom's thoughts about Stephen's thoughts about Bloom and about Stephen's thoughts about Bloom's thoughts about Stephen. He thought that he was a Jew, whereas he knew that he knew that he knew that he was not. Next, please.
What the enclosures of reticence removed were their respective parentages. Bloom, only born male, transubstantial heir of Rudolf Virag, subsequently Rudolf Bloom, of Szombathely, Vienna, Budapest, Milan, London, and Dublin, and of Ellen Higgins, second daughter of Julius Higgins, born Carolee, and Fanny Higgins, born Hegarty. Stephen, eldest surviving male consubstantial heir of Simon Daedalus of Cork and Dublin, and of Mary, daughter of Richard and Christina Goulding, born Greer. Had Bloom and Stephen been baptized, and where and by whom, cleric or layman? Bloom, 3 times, by the Reverend Mr. Gilmer Johnston, M.A., alone in the Protestant Church of St. Nicholas Without, whom, by James O'Connor, Philip Gilligan, and James Fitzpatrick, together under a pump in the village of Swords, and by the Reverend Charles Malone, C.C., in the Church of the Three Patrons, Rathgar. Stephen, once, by the Reverend Charles Malone, C.C., alone in the Church of the Three Patrons, Rathgar. Did they find their educational career similar? Substituting Stephen for Bloom, Stoom would have passed successively through a dame school and the high school. Substituting Bloom for Stephen, Leven would have passed successively through the preparatory, junior, middle, and senior grades of the intermediates and through the matriculation, first arts, second arts, and arts degree courses of the Royal University. Next, please.
That's it.
Yeah.
Time to talk about it. My goodness.
Okay.
You go, okay, here we go. All right. So it seems to start off pretty enough. Bloom refraining from giving Stephen counsels of hygiene. This is quite a statement, though. The incompatibility of aquosity with the erratic originality of genius.
Okay.
You can see that that was written by the same guy who wrote Ineluctable Modality of the Visible.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
More playfully here, though, I'm wondering, Lois.
Well, yes, because the joke is the originality of genius for Steve.
But we know that Bloom actually likes bathing, right?
Yes. Likes just sitting there, right? And contemplating.
So does this eliminate genius from Bloom?
Erratic genius at any rate, right?
Erratic originality of genius. Okay.
Joe, was Joyce a bit of a hydrophobe?
You're muted, Joe.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
But both here and in Finnegan's Wake, we had the Shem character in Finnegan's Wake, who Joyce frequently describes as being a pretty filthy guy in Finnegan's Wake. So
Yeah, but last week you were saying that people were often afraid to go near water because they thought they might catch something. So, you were as likely to catch the cold, or maybe this is something to do with Parnell. I've mentioned that before, that he died after being in the Turkish baths, which get mentioned in this. And I suppose there were a lot of different thoughts about bathing at the time. But I think Bloom or Joyce is leaving it open that Bloom might like water or loves bathing, but he could still be an erratic kind of genius.
okay.
Bloom could be the erratic.
Yeah, my understanding is, and actually I have some experience in this matter, since I lived in a colony that was primarily Americans, but also had Dutch people from Holland and people from England. And rightfully or wrongfully, the Americans would complain about body odor among the English and the Dutch. And also, I had heard that there was a thing against bathing too often because, and I think we talked about this, because it was thought to remove the protective oils from the skin.
Yes.
But there wasn't. Mhm.
Fine.
I would think that bathing actually would have been a difficult thing in houses in Dublin at the time. Am I wrong? And did houses have bathtubs?
Yes.
Yes.
The houses of the great and the good, but not every cottage, you know. But middle class people's houses would have rather ornate bathtubs.
Yeah, but
The-
they'd still have to, the water would have to be heated up and hauled up the stairs and all that sort of thing. So
Oh,
they'd only have a bath once a week.
yes, because you would have to get all your staff together to carry that water up for you, you know. And the bathroom was generally at the halfway point.
Huh.
It goes back to water pressure. What I don't know about is heating. Getting hot water, I think the water had to be drawn cold and then heated on the fire and carried up by the aforementioned staff members.
Wow.
As you say, it wasn't something you're going to do every day. I'd have to come in from your stint in the law library.
Right,
By
right.
the way, the word aquacity does not occur in the dictionary. It appears to be a creation of James Joyce. So what on earth it means is open to anyone's interpretation.
My automatic interpretation just has to do with water, properties of water.
Wateriness, just like some person we will not name who mentions truthiness having to do with truth, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so wateriness, wateriness.
Well, here is a an off the wall question. I mean, was the Turkish bath used? We know that Bloom used the Turkish bath,
Yeah,
and it was a business. It was not a so
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Like even when I was young, swimming pools were called the baths,
Yeah.
and
Oh, the swimming pools were called the baths. Okay.
because there was plenty of water there, and you could kind of go for a good wash before you get in, type of thing, you know.
Mhm.
And Torres Street baths. Anyone remember that in Dublin, Orla? You know,
I haven't joined the swimming pool there, but it's recently been done up. And they have a gym and they have a sauna. And people in Sweeney who work in Sweeney go up
yeah,
to Dunn's stores, buy a towel and a swimming togs, and it's €8 to spend the day down there.
Huh.
In the
there, yeah.
sauna and swimming pool.
Like
Huh.
that was for the great unwashed of Dublin city centre, and as was the Ivy baths and the Ivy flats, which has a magnificent swimming pool. That was the same because those flats did not have apartments. They were for the poor, and they did not have bathrooms, but they did have this magnificent swimming pool.
Uh-huh.
They called it the Ivy Baths. I remember going to swimming competition is on in the Ivy Baths. That's the way we spoke of it still in the 1960s.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm amazed that Joyce doesn't mention the Ivy Baths because he goes on about Guinness a lot.
Yeah,
Not in
given
this, but in Finnegan's Wake especially.
yeah,
And I was just going to say that for girls, it was slightly different because exposing yourself was not the done thing. So, what the nuns would have told women to do, or young girls to do, is have what's known as a wash possible. And what that means is up as far as possible, down as far as possible, and let possible take care of itself.
yes, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and with the face cloth, because
Of course,
you don't want to.
there'd be no question of mixed bathing in the swimming or washing area. I think I remember separate times for men and women.
Hmm.
I was only ever inside Tara Baths once, um, uh, and I never returned. This is
Oh, oh,
neither
no.
do we to tell you. I
I, I
would have,
went to the public baths every night for 6 years.
yeah, yeah,
And in the Japanese style, they had a men's side and a woman's side, and they were separated by a wall that was probably maybe 6 inches taller than myself.
yes,
So you could hear the other side, but you could
yeah,
not see the other side. And actually, it was delightful. It
yeah,
was like a community thing.
yeah,
And the way that it worked was they have all these little they have a wall of faucets, and then little plastic stools that you sit on, and you have little buckets, and you wash yourself first before you go into the hot bath.
Yeah.
And it was really a treat. And my job was to take the older children in with me into the men's section. And then my wife would take care of the youngest child on the other side for the most part. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you have to remember Dublin as well. Like at the time of independence, it had a huge poverty problem. It poverty equated with Bombay. You had to go as far as India to find poverty of the scale in Dublin.
Wow.
So these
It's
people,
pretty serious.
they weren't having saunas at home and stuff by any manner of means. Life was a struggle, and all rented, all paying rent. You see all these guys, the same people living in the same place for 5 years, and all this sort of thing. Like everyone, and what makes it hard to trace some of these characters as well. That they're like Aunt Josephine.
Mhm.
Different times. Last week we had the question of the was it possible for a man to drop over the edge of, well, at one
To the
point she was
wall. Mhm.
quite close to that, and but at the time of this book she would have been the other side of the city because they were moving around all the time. By the way, that source of that letter has been, I found it, that we were discussing last week. I'm sorry if anyone wasn't here last week. The question of was it possible? He did indeed write to Josephine asking that question, but it like the sort of the dangers of too much water were still being discussed when I was a child.
Mhm.
Used to hear it as well in pubs, the dangers of water. You'd be very careful putting water in your whiskey. You could get water. You put too much water in your whiskey. This kind of nonsense.
Well, was that not also partially because of the sanitary conditions of the actual water at that time?
That was it. Yeah, beer was. I presume that was the origin of that. But there were those who just used that as their excuse for not having any water in their whiskey.
Yeah, yes, exactly. 'Cause actually in the United States, for much of our history, people did not drink water.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Beer was the drink of choice. Like
Low,
the plant.
low alcohol beer.
Uh, well,
In fact, sorry, Joe, I didn't mean to cut across you. Go ahead, buddy.
Well, I was just going to say, no, just ordinary beer, because it was, the impurities were processed out of it. Whereas the water, what was in the water?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So aquacity, aquacity, aqua being Latin for water,
Uh-huh.
wateriness. Oh, I don't know.
Okay, let me ask a question of what is salt ling? And also somebody tell me in Gabler, what's this page in Gabler again?
550.
550?
Yeah. Ling is cod, according to my note. Salt cod.
Oh, makes sense.
Okay.
Oh, salted. Okay, salted cod then. Got it.
From Gifford.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm.
Well, here we have the absence of the former and the last named, so that's butter, and the abundance of the latter in the first name. Mm.
Bacon.
Well, the former and the latter, we've got three things here.
Yes.
So it's not just two things, one being the former and one being the latter.
Yeah, is it not ling and butter? Former and latter of that. The former and last named. I mean, they by definition they're connected. They're beside one another. You can't have former and latter separation. No, can you? I don't think so.
So they would have thought there was no protein in fish and butter.
But there is.
Yeah, but back then,
Oh, okay.
because you would have been having your fish on Friday. Your
Okay. I see what. Okay, so we've got the protein and calories, caloric energy, and so we're talking about the absence of the former, which would be protein, the absence of protein in butter.
You know what? We're missing the Oxford comma.
Yeah.
Is salt, ling, and butter one thing?
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Yes, it's
Yes.
actually it's salted cod, I believe, according
Okay.
to the
So butter
It's
is not
salted
separate.
cod.
It's part of the codfish.
Based on the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Aha, you see, we don't have the Oxford
Calories.
comma. That's why it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to hear what Sloat has to say?
Yes.
That butter is the last named, and bacon is the first named.
Okay.
Well, that's no help.
So he's saying he's saying there's no protein in butter, but there's lots of caloric energy in bacon.
Yeah, butter has, I didn't read the whole thing. Butter, the last named, has no protein, whereas bacon, the first named, is highly calorific.
Right.
So that's what he thinks.
But
Okay.
I believe that is scientifically untrue, is it not?
I don't know.
Well, there should be protein in butter because it's made of milk, right? And isn't there protein in milk?
I don't think there's protein in butter. There's
Sorry?
oil in butter.
Is there a protein in dairy? Is the question.
Right. That's the question. Is there
Well,
not
there is
protein?
in some dairy, but
Yeah.
not in all
Okay.
dairy. There's protein in
Google
cheese
search. Okay.
and there's protein in milk.
All right, here we go.
But butter is going to be pretty much oil and, it's going to be calories with no protein.
Right.
I've never heard of protein being in butter, but I could be misinformed.
Yeah. Sloat goes on, summarizing it. Eugene Sando's book, Strength and How to Obtain It. Do you remember that book that Bloom read? Includes a table that copies information on the relative amounts of protein and energy in various foods. Now, this book could be wrong.
Well, according to Mr. Google, dairy products such as milk, cheese, yogurt provide high quality protein that contains all the essential amino acids the body needs.
Yeah.
Butter contains.
It doesn't specify butter. It's milk, cheese, yogurt, but it may be there even though it's not included.
Yeah. Yeah, like some of the I don't think Sando's book Strength and How to Obtain It is a reliable guide. And that's why Bloom has picked, he's using it doesn't help that the amounts are not stated in Sando. Strength and How to Obtain It does not state, it states them in price.
Yeah.
And later on, he talks about the strength of his abdominal muscles when he's on the lever or something. He's able to pull himself up.
Yeah.
So he must have been very interested in physical health and diet.
Yes. Somewhere in my work, see, I have a paper that a guy came into Swinney's one day and we all asked for a copy of it. It was a commentary on Leopold Bloom, the fitness of Leopold Bloom, and it was a very substantial document. I went into all that. It's bare somewhere in the files.
Dave, give me that that line number in Gabler again.
Give me read the first bit of the line, and I'll give you the number.
Well, let's go with the incompatibility of aquosity.
Okay, so it would be 50, 49, 48, 42, 47. Page
Say that
5.
again.
Sorry, I
247.
believe it was line 247 on line
Ah,
5, page 550.
okay. That's my problem. I was looking in the wrong place.
Okay, and just while you're looking here, let me say that we can all claim victory on this in this butter and protein argument. I just put it in the chat. Technically, it contains some protein, but very little.
Yeah.
So
Mr. Google says butter is about 80% fat and the rest is water.
right,
They have a lot of protein.
oh,
It basically has been separated from protein
Right.
and carbs.
so there are traces of it. Apparently,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
want to get you on a technicality, but
Protein,
I guess essentially
salty,
this is correct. Doesn't contain a lot. Yeah.
Can we go back to the incompatibility of aquosity with the erratic originality of genius? Could that be the narrator? Because if it's the incompatibility of Aqua City, Dublin as inspiration, with the erratic originality of Joyce who had to leave.
Oh, that's an interesting interpretation.
It is.
Joyce had to go away, but his inspiration was Dublin, the Aqua City, and Olivia, Pluribel, all that.
That's a very interesting interpretation, Orla.
City.
Because here in Austin we have a river going through it called the Colorado River, and as frequently happens in cities that have rivers, they are referred to locally as River City.
Yep.
Everything's up to date in River City.
Okay. That's interesting, Orla. That's great.
Mm.
Yeah.
But I think once again, I don't know why, Joe. I think that Joyce was a little bit of a hydrophobe. I can certainly not point to anything directly, except for in his writing. He has his he's got Stephen Dedalus as a hydrophobe, and in Finnegan's Wake, he makes a big deal of how dirty and how unbathed Stephen is, or Shem is.
Yeah.
Doesn't in a portrait of an artist as a young man, doesn't Stephen also somewhere mention when he was in Clongowes about how you'd have to be, how he was kind of nervous of washing, you'd have to be eyeing behind. Now I assume this
Yeah,
is the
because
lads.
the other boys would
Yeah.
push
But
your
there's some,
head and do something to
yeah,
you.
there was something about that. That he was kind of nervous. Or maybe that's contributed to why he wouldn't be washing in front of people, which would explain why he wouldn't go into the 40-foot, or he wouldn't wash. But he's just
He certainly thought about water an awful lot as an author. It was always on his mind.
yeah.
Yes, that's true, and he's certainly very positive about water and the character of Anne Olivia. But I mean, he was raised under difficult circumstances, shall we say, with very little money in the household.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the chances of bathing being a regular feature in the Joyce household, I think it's
It would have been initially
Did-
when
yeah.
you read back. over it, and they had a nursery and servants and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Initially, it was probably
They went from way up there to
In Martello,
burning their furniture. Yeah.
in Martello Terrace in Bray, they're number one. And the building that will be number 0 was the washrooms for the whole block. And that's where he's 6 years of age.
Yeah, they'd come down so quick.
Yeah, the building is still there. If you look at it on Google Maps or you go in there, water, you'll see number 1 is the first building towards the sea, Joyce's rented house, and beside it, what looks like a slipway for boats or things now. I don't know what it's used for now, but that was the washrooms for the whole block. I remember an architect telling us that in the house one day. I'm just thinking, like Duncan, his concern with water could be born in childhood.
Mm.
When people constantly traipsing by their window on their way, wrapped in towels or carrying towels into the washroom. Perhaps water would have been very close to him in his childhood. There's nothing to indicate it in Elman in the there's all sorts of pages on the index of why
no
this
discussion of bathing or
water is
washing.
not mentioned, but obviously, like if you were to go and look at all the health references, you may find,
Mhm.
I think you're probably on something there, all right.
Um,
All right. Going on to the next thing there. I really like this, which seemed to the host to be the predominant qualities of his guest: confidence in himself, an equal and opposite power of abandonment and recuperation.
Yeah.
Which I take also to mean that actually, now that the time has passed between when they left the brothel and they went to the cabman's shelter, and now they're at Bloom's residence, that actually Stephen's doing pretty well, in spite of the fact that he hasn't eaten
Yeah.
much and has not rested in a long, long time.
What's his power of abandonment?
Getting drunk, going without food,
Yeah,
without rest.
yeah.
And plus, his friends had kind of taken off on him, right?
And he was abandoned, yes.
He also abandoned his family.
True. That's right.
And he abandoned Martello Tower, and he's
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, I understand, I'm amazed now. I mean, when I was 19, it was possible for me to eat very poorly, to do with very little sleep.
Yeah.
And, when I was in clinical practice, and particularly when I would come across people in their late 20s, early 30s, and a common complaint was, I don't know what's going on. I used to be able to stay up all night and I was just fine. And now I feel tired.
Yeah.
And I would give them the Chinese explanation for that, which is until you're of that age, 29 to early 30s, the energy you have, you did not earn. It was given to you by your parents.
Okay.
And when you hit that age, you have used up your inheritance from your parents. And then it is incumbent upon the person to earn their own energy.
Yeah. It, on that kind of topic, the 16th of June is very close to shortest night of the year, which was
Longest night,
the longest day.
oh, excuse me. Yes, you're right. Excuse me.
Night. In other words, I mean, that was last week. Went out there last week at 10:30 at night. You could still read a newspaper.
Yep.
Mhm.
And on the 16th of June, it was dawn at 4 a.m. So that means the sky would get light around 3. Now, I remember, and a little bit younger than Stephen is here, like you'd have barbecues, you'd stay up all night. You'd be going home in the broad daylight. You get home around 8 a.m. And it was common practice. It was even a problem of public order. You would get kind of uncouth behavior right through the night. It was a time for riot in Dublin. So so Stephen, the whole idea is Stephen walks off from here at whatever time it is. It's getting bright when he's leaving.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so it's not like this was taking place on the 21st of December when the reverse is the case, where it's blooming practically 24 hours of darkness. The sun does not actually set properly on that week in June. It's just below the horizon, and the sky is light. For about 2 weeks, the sun does not actually fully set.
Really?
It's
Really?
down on the horizon, but it's still causing the light.
You're that far north.
52 degrees north.
Okay. Yeah, because
So-
that's okay. Yeah.
So, just in context of the discussion about recovering from and being up all
Mhm.
and doing well, probably being used to
You're
all
actually
night parties and that sort of thing. Anyone going to back me on that from Ireland? Dan, you might have been at all night parties when you were a teenager, were you?
It would still
Never.
No comment.
Never.
well, I can
Denies
assure you
everything.
that.
Okay, I've wandered off a bit there, folks. Sorry.
There.
Yeah, well, when I was younger, I would just keep going until I decided I was not going to go any further, and then I would collapse
Yeah.
and sleep maybe for a whole day.
Yeah.
That was my mode of recovering, was just keep pushing until I thought, oh well, there's nothing else to do. I'm going to go to sleep, and then I would be out like a light for a long time,
Yeah, exactly.
and
Yeah.
wake up and not know whether it was morning or night or.
Today. Oh yes, absolutely.
But that ended, and of course now it's absurd. I mean, it's almost flipped itself. The amount of time that I sleep now is absurd.
Oh,
I don't mind it. You know,
okay. Yeah.
I've done a lot, and it's like somebody had a thing yesterday, I think it was. It said my idea of an ideal day is about 2 hours of activity and 22 hours of sleep and rest.
yeah.
And I thought, yeah, that sounds like me. Let me see here. I can actually find out. I think.
Well, he's looking, Joy. I did want to say that that's a good point you made about the shortness of the night.
Yeah.
So you're a degree over a full degree north of where I live. You're 53 and change. I'm 52 and change. I just Googled it.
Yeah.
So I actually have to head to the basement at about 4 in the morning because the light's coming through our bedroom window. Sunrise, I think, is officially about 4:30. And I was biking the other day, after 10 o'clock, and the street lights had just come on. So it is, you're right, June 16th, for those of us who live in northern climates, is a very short night.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wonderful,
Right, but I mean, I think it's important in this story that when Stephen wanders off, he's not going to be in the dark for very long.
yeah, he's not walking into pitch darkness and
I was just, yeah, it's not real dark,
Oh,
dark.
it's
I hadn't
not.
thought
That's
about it
right.
either.
Yeah, because Anne, you'd be getting the same. You'd be about because
Yeah.
I'm south of Dublin, so you might be on my same latitude. And I mean, it's just astonishing. You know, even 11 at night, you can still see some residual
Right.
light after the sun is set where I live.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So most of this is happening in daylight on the 16th of June.
That's probably why he leaves. He sees it's getting lighter time to.
Yeah.
It also explains to a certain extent why Bloom is, I mean, in addition to his wife's infidelity, why Bloom is still wandering around in the city late at night.
Right.
Mm. Yeah.
Right.
It's very light outside, and physiologically,
Right.
we respond to light.
Yeah.
You do.
As there's light, we continue to be active.
You do.
Okay.
So if you, I could hardly get through the paragraph that I read, which is the next one. It is so funny. It's just, you can imagine Joyce writing this and just trying to bloat and expand it as much as possible. And he does. I mean, it's what's the word? Flaccidness, I think, is a sign of his genius. I mean, he just gets rolling here. And the multisyllabic words are just rolling off his pen.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the scientific terms and so forth. It's just great. So he does get some stuff wrong, in terms of the fact checking, because he said right near the end, it's an expenditure of 72 thermal units. And I've got a note, and I think it's from Gifford saying actually this should be 162 BTUs. But again, what he didn't have, and we do have, is if we're writing something, we can do a quick check on the internet. He didn't. He's pulling this out of his brain.
Yeah.
And this might be intentional.
And it might be because it's Bloom, which is if it's filtered through Bloom's consciousness, he does get things wrong, and that's part of the humor of Bloom.
Yeah.
Well, now, is this true? I mean, we do have this question of it is about Bloom. It is about Bloom heating water in the kettle for the cocoa. But I mean, who is doing the phenomenon of ebullition, fanned by a constant updraft of ventilation between blah blah blah? Who is doing that?
Yeah. Well, I asked the opposite end of that question last week. I said, who is asking the questions? And during the week, I was thinking, and who is giving the answers?
Right.
Because these answers Bloom could not be making, and others of them Stephen could not be making. It's very strange. It's as if the questioner is answering himself.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a narrator-free zone?
This paragraph reminded me of Mr. Micawber from David Copperfield.
Right.
Yes.
And
That's a great comparison.
And I felt that at the end he would say, in short, it boiled.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Well, we're have echoes of Molly saying, "Oh, rocks, tell us in plain language."
Right.
But they're both of the main characters, the two main male characters, Bloom and Stephen. Now, Stephen, when he's drunk, he's very laconic and gives short answers and doesn't want to be bothered. But in the other works, he's quite He's quite verbose. And also Bloom, who does get things frequently wrong, is not a short answer type person.
Mm.
Oh, oh.
And speaks with confidence, even when he's getting stuff wrong. But I love all this stuff because, of course, once you read something like this and really pay attention to it, you will never look at your stove in the same manner. I'll even make a further comment. I mean, this really is the way of modern times. This is how we get progress, is by the investigators breaking things down into all these little tiny facts. And then, the engineers reading this and discovering some new way to make it more efficient.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, scientists now just seem to spend their whole careers investigating one thing.
Yeah, smaller and smaller
Oh.
and smaller little things. And I can speak of this in the sense of I use an induction burner now.
Yeah. What is
My
that?
gas stove has been sitting idle for almost 2 years now
Right.
because I cook everything on an induction burner, which is a
Right.
totally, a different sort of process.
Is there any religious book that some sort of meditations on that, the way somebody sent me a link to a Tibetan meditator called Mingyur Rinpoche, and it's the power of meditating on sensations. And so when you read this, it's almost like a meditation, the meditation of awareness, where you're aware of your breathing, you're aware of your body, you're aware of
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
aware of your surroundings. But there
Yeah.
must have been some religious book that goes through, the way there's like the meditations of Saint so and so, and not Augustine or not, the way that they all, and it's not about visions, it's about something enormously practical. And I think Lois said it was like reading your catechism, the questions earlier on. So I think he's, in a sense, sort of punning on one of those religious texts
Yes.
that tells you about the world and is a meditative guide for the religious.
Yes.
That's a very interesting statement you're making there, Orla. And yes, there are many practices. I can probably speak best, although not authoritatively, about the Zen practice. The Zen practice is actually to get to the point where you're just looking at things with pure awareness. But a way to approach that, particularly for a modern person, is exactly like this. It is to look at phenomena in greater and greater detail. It gives the mind something to do, and it makes you more aware of your surroundings. So,
Yeah. If there's a book, if anyone, I don't know if others are, Dave might be familiar with The Imitation of Christ.
Yeah, Thomas à Kempis.
It's a camp. true patience in suffering. That'd be a thing, you know. And then there's a meditation on that. Strength against slander. You know, I'm looking at the index of it here. Uh, um, um, uh, the right ordering of external affairs. You know, this sort of thing. A topic many do not heed them, and you go in. And I know that's the part of the Roman Catholic contemplative life that people read Thomas à Kempis, who's,
Right.
who is
Well,
he wasn't canonized, but I remember we did it at school, and but it all obviously it answers those questions in religious terms, but it goes into, you know, can you believe everything? It is easy to err in speech. That's one of the topics. Discusses that round, and something like that maybe, Orly, you might have in mind. I don't know.
I think we can
Well, I
also
wouldn't know, but sorry, Dave.
Orly, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I don't know, but I would guess that they were religious Catholic texts that were the inspiration for this.
I think so.
And
Saint Thomas Aquinas.
No, a campus. Just a sec. I'll put his name in
No,
the chat.
no. I'm offering an alternative
Oh, okay,
The
sorry.
Confessions?
Catholic writer who goes into excruciating detail
Yeah.
about many things. I mean, you know, what is it? I think I downloaded St. Thomas Aquinas, what, God, 10,000 pages, 20,000 pages, I think is the digital text.
Yeah.
reasons for the existence of God.
And
Yeah.
going into real serious detail about everything is my understanding. I cannot pretend to have read much of Aquinas.
Yeah.
He
But
was,
Joyce called this a catechism format. I mean, that's Catholic. I don't know if Protestants have catechisms, but you know, like that's the rule book. You know, what is a sin? Is
Mhm.
it always sinful? You know, and the answer, it gives you an explanation why the position, and it's kind of like a rule book. And he uses that word, catechism, to describe this episode.
The
So
Ithaca episode.
hmm,
We're talking
this
about Ithaca, the Ithaca chapter.
is the technique. And it's almost as if he's creating the world that Bloom and Stephen inhabit. And he's giving you the rules of this world. When was the first time they met? And he's just told us there back when Stephen was whatever age it was, 5, was it?
5.
And you know, and he's giving you the rules of the universe that is the Ulysses, something like that.
Hmm.
And kind of, I mean, it's as if the catechism was like something God has written for us, you see. And in a way, the author is the creator of the characters, and he's writing the catechism that their world goes by. Something like
Well, we will have a chance to continue this. I've actually got it marked. I've got 2 marks in my book because we may want to say some more about this whole paragraph of the phenomena of emulation. So we'll probably do a little there, and then we'll definitely talk about what announced the accomplishment of the rise in temperature.
Lois, we both mark it. I'm in a wedding in Toronto next week, so I won't
Okay.
be here. Have you got it?
All right, so I'll use the first choice. What concomitant phenomenon?
concomitant phenomenon.
So what line,
Okay.
what line is that?
That's
Where are we?
about 256 on,
256, that's where we're starting?
that's what we're thinking about.
Okay.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. To
Excellent.
56.
And our usual plug, if you feel so inclined, we are back at the same time, 24 hours from now, to discuss King Lear. And we have left our buddy Kent in the stocks. So you can
Has
join us.
anybody been blinded yet?
No,
No, we're a
blinded.
long way
No,
from
not yet.
there.
Yes, we are. So you can you can tune in, Lois, without fear of ocular loss tomorrow. All right.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good weekend. Bye bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Okay.